All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Levon Esibov. I'm a group program manager at Microsoft. I've been with the company for almost 16 years. And the last 2.5 years, I've been working on Exchange Online protection team. I'm part of the engineering team. And our team is focused on building and delivering Exchange Online protection. Today's session, I want to make it as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask the questions. If I feel that we're running behind the schedule, I'll cut questions at some point and so that we can address them at the end. But I'll make sure to not hold you here beyond the end. I know everybody is eager to go to a party, so I'll not be the blocker for that. Before we start, one thing I do want to emphasize is many of you probably already using Exchange Online. You have hosted mailboxes. And many of you are thinking about moving there. Every single email that is sent to your hosted mailboxes, as well as every single mail that goes out from the Exchange Online mailboxes, goes through this system called Exchange Online Protection. So today I'm going to talk about how it works. As well, I will emphasize one interesting aspect of Exchange Online Protection, that even if you have 0 mailboxes in Exchange Online today, and for one reason or the other, you are not planning on moving in the next few months or year or what time horizon you have, you still can take advantage of Exchange Online protection. And that's what my first introductory slide is about. We have plenty of customers today who haven't moved their mailboxes to the cloud yet, but they route their mail traffic inbound as well as outbound through Exchange Online protection, so that we ensure mail delivery on your behalf, as well as we conduct anti-spam and anti-malware filtering on your behalf. So the world that we live in, I don't need to spend much time here, but we are facing constantly morphing threats. Threats from malware that is evolving, where people have full-time job creating those threats and attacking us, as well as threats from spam. Some spam could be benign, just obnoxious and wasting time of your employees. But other attacks could be dangerous from security point of view. So what we do is provide the defense against those. In addition to this, you are focused more than probably we on the prevention of data loss. And we address those requirements to protect sensitive data, as well as to help you to satisfy the compliance requirements, whether it's HIPAA or PCI or what have you. And all of that needs to happen while you keep the productivity of your employees. And that's what we focused on. So let me give a one-slide high-level overview of what the Exchange Online Protection is about. We ensure, where we empower you to protect against the viruses, malware, spam. We run multi-engine anti-malware solution, where we have 3 antivirus engines. One of them is Microsoft engine, and 2 others, non-Microsoft, very reputable AV solutions. We have our proprietary anti-spam solution that is leveraging heuristics, algorithms that we develop ourselves, as well as we leverage a lot of input from other reputable parties in the industry, whether in terms of the reputation of the IP addresses or reputation of URLs, etc. In addition to this, significant portion of our charter is to provide the data protection capabilities. You've seen today in the keynotes capabilities on encryption, as well as data loss prevention. And those are available as part of Exchange Online Protection. Our administrative capabilities are natively incorporated into Office 365, and they feel and look same as Exchange Admin Console, and you will see those. I'll show a demo there. And we have pretty rich and detailed reporting capabilities that continue to evolve so that you get all the insights and all the information you need about the delivery capabilities, about how many mails delivered, how much spam there is, how much malware, etc. Even though we do it on your behalf in the cloud, you get the same reporting as you would on-prem. The one thing I do want to emphasize is this enterprise world-class reliability. And I want to start with the first bullet point because, frankly, I didn't know it would get as much attention. And it didn't get as much attention a year ago. But now, every day, I hear more and more questions from customers on, when you route our mail, can you guarantee affinity to a particular region in the world? And the answer is yes. In our predecessor service that used to be known as FOPI, some of you may have heard of it, we did not have assurance to route to a particular region. We could fail over from one region to another. With introduction of Exchange Online Protection, we do provide guarantee that your mail will be processed in those data centers where your tenant is provisioned. So I'll talk a little bit more about it as well. We have queuing capabilities, so if that for some reason the recipient is not capable of taking emails, we will queue them for some time and we will retry on a regular basis. We do have 24/7, 365 Microsoft support, and I'll spend a little bit more time on support on the next slide as well. And of course, we do have financially backed SLA. Now, this is not a new service. I put this slide thinking about what are the best ways to characterize how mature the service is. By today, we literally have many hundreds of thousands of customers who are using us. And I did not want to provide specific number for competitive, etc. reasons, but I give you a ballpark, the order of magnitude. And those hundreds of thousands of customers translates into tens of millions of users that are using mail on a regular basis, on daily basis. That translates into more than 1 billion messages every day processed by our system. If you do the math, every second there is more than 10,000 messages going through the pipeline. So since the beginning of this sentence, probably more than 100,000 emails already went through our system. It's very mature, very scalable, and large system. It is enabled by thousands of servers that we deploy in dozens of data centers around the globe. But the most important part, where I feel comfortable and I feel proud, and I want to share with you, is there is more than 100 engineers behind this effort, and that's geeky gentleman with a cup of coffee represents each one of our engineers that are behind this service. And it's not only they're writing the service, but the model we operate in, that every single engineer that writes the part of the code of our solution is available to take the call when something goes wrong with the service. So I'll spend a couple minutes on this because it's super important. It's transformative in how we live our lives. It changed. This is not, we didn't just change. We've been living this life for a year plus by now. And when I say we're ready to take the call, it doesn't mean that we're on support lines taking the call from customers. And it doesn't mean that my entire team is on call at the same time. But every single critical area of our service, whether it's transport or anti-spam or anti-malware, and I can continue with list, has at least 2 people who are on call, who know that it is part of the job to put everything aside when the call comes and fix the service. Not tinkle with the product to understand what's going wrong, let me understand what's the bug is, but to restore the service immediately. That is our P0, and people really live that culture. Now, you can say, well, still sucks. If you wait for me to call before your engineers engage, it's not such a robust model. And of course, we don't. If we learn about an incident in our environment from customer call, that means we failed already. What we rely on is we have fairly sophisticated and rich set of probes that are bombarding our services, imitating the same popular tasks that our users and administrators are attempting to perform on a regular basis. If some of those probes fail, then we have automated system that generates a call that comes to cell phone of an engineer on call. And if he doesn't pick it up immediately, it goes to backup. And if he doesn't pick it up immediately, it goes to the next layer of incident managers and so on. So it's a very robust system there. But it's not only that we rely on the alerts that are coming from probes. We're also constantly monitoring resource utilization. So if for some reason in some segment of servers the CPU utilization goes up, we immediately get notification and we start learning what's happening there. We start troubleshooting before anybody is impacted to this. Moreover, if we see deviation from normal behavior of the system, like one example would be we see growing queues in our servers. So we know that something is unusual. Of course, queues are always there because we're dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of the Exchange recipients and other big providers of email in the world. And if something goes down, if some server is not able to receive emails, the queues will start growing. But when we see that the growth goes beyond the norm, then that wakes up people, and people start troubleshooting it before customers see it. So in dominant majority of cases, our engineers are woken up at the first sign of, is it possible that something is going wrong? And they troubleshoot it, and if indeed there is some simmering issue that hasn't impacted the world yet, they address it before it does. So that's a very important point that I wanted to land here. And you can feel passion because I'm truly grateful to the team that is doing it. It's a hard job. And today I was sitting next to one of our colleagues, in fact, few colleagues, and when they were showing the quotes from the people who migrated their mailbox to the cloud, saying that, well, we don't get the calls anymore at 2 a.m. in the morning. Well, now we do. So somebody's got to get a call. The question is who is going to be. But the cloud model shifts the burden on us. So when we write the code, we keep it in mind so that we write it in such a way and with such telemetry and probes that it doesn't wake us up unless the issue is indeed about to happen, and then we prevent it. So this is a conceptual diagram of how the Exchange Online protection works. Your right side here on the slide is your on-premise network. If you're in the cloud, you can think of the cloud mailbox. In the center, it's Exchange Online protection. And on the left side, it is the rest of the world. Those who send you the emails and those who you send emails to. And as I mentioned earlier, every single mail in the regular configuration would go through our service to your on-premise mailboxes, and vice versa. The more dominant majority of people configure it in such a way that the outbound mail also goes through us. Why am I saying dominant majority? Because it's your power to configure connectors as you want, but most of the people configure the mail to go out through us, through our service. Now let me double-click on the central square and show you at the next level of details the inbound filtering conceptually. So I do want to emphasize a couple of things here. So when the mail arrives, it comes from the cloud, from somewhere else. It comes to our front doors. So I'll explain to you how do we make sure that the mail is processed in your region. And we have today a number of regions. We have the region in North America, where all data centers are located in US. We have European region. Soon we're going to have APAC, Asia Pacific region. We have already China, the mainland China, People Republics of China. And we have governmental community cloud within the United States. And we're going to stay on that trend on providing the geo-affinitized solutions. So when the mail comes, it is routed based on DNS records, right? So first it resolves the MX record to know where to send the mail. And the MX record returns the host name. So the host name is host name of our servers. And that host name is being resolved by our data center, by our DNS server. So that DNS server is advanced. It goes against the database that looks up for every single customer that we have, what is the region of that customer. And based on the region of the customer specified in our provisioning database, we return the A record for the servers in that particular region. That's how we guarantee that it never goes to somebody else's region. It goes only through your region. Then, once the mail is filtered at the, then the mail arrives to the front door. So this is our front doors. And the filtering is mainly made there based on IP of the sender, as well as based on the envelope blocks. There is the blacklist and whitelist of IP addresses that is performed here, as well as we have the reputation for the domains of senders, etc. And based on that information, I'll share with you, it's not secret, but good portion of emails stopped right there. Because spam today constitutes more than 60% of all traffic. It's getting better. 3 years ago or 5 years ago, if I remember correctly, it was in 95, 97% vicinity. Now it's going down, but they're becoming more sophisticated. So once the mail survives that first filtering, it is sent then to virus scanning. And as I mentioned, in virus scanning, we have 3 engines. One of them is Microsoft engine, and 2 others are the ones that are the best performing, and we have a relationship with those vendors, and we use them. Now, I should emphasize, our SLA guarantees that at least 2 engines are going to be used. In reality, dominant majority of time, 3 engines are used. So you can say, so why don't you guarantee 3? Because there are some potential issues when we update one engine, etc. We may need to take one engine out for a few seconds. But that's why there is no guarantee. But we guarantee 2 engines at least. And based on your configuration, that mail that contains malware could be dumped entirely at that point and not propagate. That message will be stopped and put in the trash. Or if you configured it such so that we can remove the attachment and append the text, include the text notifying the recipient that the attachment contained a virus, such and such virus, and for that reason was removed. So those mails that survive this stage, they progress to the next one, the policy enforcement. This is where exchange transport policies kick in. And depending on the number of policies you have and depending on criteria, the appropriate actions are taken here. So one of the actions that you could configure to use is quarantine the message. If that's the case, if the message triggers a policy that is configured to quarantine the messages that hitting that policy, the message will be quarantined right there. The messages that survive this filter go to the anti-spam protection. And this is probably one of the most sophisticated pieces of the solution. You can see there are many different checks that are applied there. They are based on the safe sender list that is configured by you as admins or by users. There is the content scanning and heuristic that is calculated based on machine-based learnings as well as implemented by humans. We have a team of spam analysts that are creating rules and heuristics that monitor, well, spam analysts monitoring what's happening in the world, create appropriate rules to stop the evolving spam campaigns, and then apply it to our spam engine. There is SPF check, there is bulk mail filtering, there is filtering based on URLs of known phishing sites. So there is plenty of heuristics and rules that are applied at this level. And there is also international spam. I'm going to mention it slightly later in the presentation. The customers can configure whether you want the message that is configured as spam to propagate to the junk mail folder of the user or to store it in quarantine. And if your decision is to store it in quarantine, then that's when the message is placed into quarantine-based database here. Now, I mentioned spam analyst. And after that, the mail is delivered to a corporate network, to your on-premise Exchange server. Or if you have the mailbox in the cloud, it goes to the mailbox in the cloud. I mentioned here spam analysts. I said that they're creating rules that help defend against the spam. Now, there are multiple signals that they are analyzing. Some signals are coming from you, from administrators, from users that are reporting false positives or false negatives. If you're not familiar with that terminology, it's the messages that were considered to be spam while they were good, and vice versa. The messages that were considered to be good that turned out to be spam. That signal is very important to us. In addition to this, what we do is we get the signals from other major providers of mail services in the world. When they start receiving spam from us, we get signals from them that, hey, Microsoft, you're sending spam. So we take those spam that we missed, and we create the special rules to defend against them. In addition to this, we subscribe to the list of honeypots. If some of you may know, it's traps to catch the spammers. And we get the samples of those of that spam that maybe hasn't hit us yet, but will hit soon. And we proactively create those rules. Talking about proactive, remember when I said that at the entrance here, we stop most of the mail based on the IP address of senders? We are not just dumping that mail and forget about it. We take some portion of that mail and we analyze it. Because based on IP addresses of senders, we know that they're sending bad mail. But bad mail could be useful to us to detect the evolution of spam attacks and to adjust our defenses later on in this pipeline to defend against attacks that maybe haven't hit us yet. Yes? Question?
The customer has access to those emails?
It depends. That's a good question. So the mails that are stopped here, absolutely yes. The mails that are stopped here, no. And based on the feedback that we've been getting from customers, that's exactly what I've heard is the need. Because those that are stopped at the front line, there's 99.999, many nines certainty that those are bad emails. Is there any disagreement on that in the room? No. Yes? Fantastic point. In fact, I was about to move to the next slide, and I forgot about making that point, and I was thinking that I should. Thank you. So every single mail that enters our system beyond this front edge is tracked. There is a component that's called message tracing in our solution, and that message tracing is tracking every single mail that passes this first filter. So if mail is stopped because of virus detection, we record it. You have access to that. Not to virus, but to a record that such and such mail contains virus known as blah. When there is policy enforcement, and policy enforcement may result in mail being stopped. For example, if there are offensive words, and your policy just says, don't send those emails to my employees, the mail will be stopped there, and we will have a record of that. And the same happens all the way from here to here. So every single mail will be traced there. We're not storing the content of mail, but we're storing the envelope information as well as meta information on what happened to that mail, at what second it entered, where, and why did we stop it, if we stopped. Or if we delivered, then when did we deliver it. Okay? I'll steal my own thunder, and I'll talk about it later. When we shipped the products a year ago, this message trace information was held there for 7 days only. We received plenty of feedback that it's not long enough, and we extended it to up to 90 days now. So for 7 days, you can get the data in real time. Beyond 7 days, you can easily craft a query that interests you, and it's going to take a few hours, and the mail will be sent to you as notification, and you will get the full report. I'll show it in a demo. Yeah, I think that these are the main points on this slide. Let's move on and talk about the outbound traffic. In some sense, it is similar, except we don't stop on the front door based on IP addresses because we know that you are our customers and your IP addresses are good. So we take your email there, and we push it through the virus scanning. Similar as before, we do stop the viruses. Even if you are our paying customer, we're not letting you send the the viruses to the rest of the world. Then we apply the policy enforcement, and you've seen today in the keynotes the DLP demo, and I'm sure there are other sessions on DLP. DLP enforcement is taking place in this box called policy enforcement. In fact, I mentioned that policy enforcement is referring to exchange transport rules. DLP is built on top of that. So when you configure DLP policy, data loss prevention policy, they are translated into the transport rules, and that's where they're enforced. And if somebody is trying one of your employees, maybe disgruntled, maybe by mistake, trying to send 10,000 social security numbers of your customers, that's where it's going to be stopped. then we do the spam protection here. We apply some of the logic that is used in the protection on the inbound flow. And the interesting thing happens there is that we split our traffic into two outbound pools. We have the green low score outbound pool, where the mails appear to be good. And then the suspicious mails, where we're not certain that it's 100% spam, but it's very close to spam. It's very high score that it is spam. We will send it out through the high-risk delivery pool. And the reason for that is protection of IP reputation is absolutely critical for availability of our service. If we use the same pipeline to send the spam and non-spam, then other players in the industry are going to stop blocking our mail. So that's why it is super critical for us to preserve the high reputation of our IP addresses. Of course, brand of Microsoft helps, but it doesn't give us free pass to go to anybody in the world and say, oh, believe me, these are good IP addresses. No, it doesn't work that way. We have to work hard to preserve the reputation of our IP addresses. And that's why if some of your employees get hacked, their user account gets compromised, and they start sending tons of spam, we will stop them. You'll get notification, but we will block their ability to continue to send spam. So. Yes, question? Excellent question. The answer is yes, you can be notified. I'll show you how to configure it. Okay.
If you're a public IP that you route to EOP through,
Uh-huh.
blacklisted, is that going to interrupt your mail flow outbound EOP?
That's a great question. So the question is, if our outbound IP address gets blacklisted by some reputation providers, the answer is yes, if we do nothing. But we have a set of, excessive list of IP addresses. So if one IP address...
Oh, let me rephrase that. If my IP address
Oh,
is blacklisted,
okay.
that I route mail through EOP to, for outbound mail, are you going to reject mail from me, or is there some...
I don't think we... I need to... Do you remember, Ori?
It depends. If you're rejected by a reputable...
You want to take a mic? Yeah. So the question was, if my IP address gets blacklisted from on-premise, sending the mail to us, to EOP, what's going to happen?
So the answer to that's going to be, right now, we don't do that. We will accept all mail from our customers. Moving forward, though, and we have a bunch of sessions coming up in MAC talking about this specific issue, among others, for anti-spam, we're going to start evaluating the reputation of all things coming through our service. And so if we see your IP or your domain or something else on a bunch of industry reputable blacklists, it will get weighed in how we calculate and evaluate, okay, is what's coming from this submission high risk or not?
But let me just make one more clarification, just make sure I understood. So the scenario is you are our on-premise customer. You're routing your outbound mail through EOP, and your IP address gets blacklisted by a number of reputation providers. It is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that today we do not block your mail. We will see that you are sending a bunch of spam because we apply the spam protection. If we see that it is localized to a set of individual users who've been compromised, we will block their ability. You will get notification that your users were sending tons of spam and we blocked them. Go fix them. Because in 99% of cases, they're compromised. And you want to know about that anyway, regardless of spam. Spam is just canary. But I remember only one situation in the last year where the whole tenant was compromised and was sending a bunch of things. So, and that's when we stopped the ability of tenants to send the mail. But of course, you'll be notified in that situation. It's extreme. As I mentioned, we have hundreds of thousands of customers. So if one of them was it, you get the point of how rare it is. Yes, question over there.
If we're currently using
Oh, yeah. Quarantine is not enabled by default. It is you take extra step to enable quarantine. If you don't enable quarantine, all the mail will go through. Well, not all email, but all email that would end up in quarantine would go through. Yes? Question?
Speaking of quarantine, do you have on the roadmap an end-user access?
Yes, I'm smiling because the answer is yes, we do, and I have it in one of the upcoming slides as yes, it's coming. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yes?
The old update website, I want to go in and say, put in one of my users, and I want to see all of their email traffic, whether inbound or outbound.
Mm-hmm.
And Floppy wouldn't let you do that. It required that you put in at least one domain name or a specific email address. Does that change with this?
I think we can do it in MTRT, right? Yes, yeah. In fact, I was practicing one of my demos, and I was using star at everything, at your domain, and I got the list of all the mails that were sent to the entire domain. Yeah. Any other questions at the moment? No. Okay. So the funnel on the right, let me move away this laser pointer. Oh, this funnel, or it pretends to be funnel, effectively what happens is this is a good mail, this is spam, this is malware, and at the end of the funnel, you get only good mail. So as simple as that. Now, as I mentioned, the connection filtering, connection-based filtering, is capturing most of the spam. It's 80% of the spam. Then based on sender-recipient information, we catch another 15%. And finally, the content-based, another heuristic, catch the remaining 5%. So you can say, oh, 5% is not a big deal. But in reality, we're striving there for fraction of a percent to improve the quality. So industry right now is at a stage where we're not talking about single percent point anymore. We're striving for the last few centimeters or inches, if you will. And the configuration and the control that you have there, you can specify your own allow and block IP addresses, and we'll respect those for you. Or you can leverage ours that we have. In fact, you can do both. And then you have two categories of categorizing spam. I think we use different terminology in the UI itself. But there are two categories are the spam that we certain is spam, and then there is high confidence spam, where there is still some chance of having a false positive, but in many, many, many cases, it will be spam. And our SLA on false positives is 1 out of 250,000 messages could be interpreted as spam while it's good mail. But you have the flexibility there to control, to dial the tone, if you will. Because in anti-spam world, it always comes down to balance. If you want to be more aggressive against stopping spam, chances are you will have more false positives, still within SLA. But even if 1 out of 250,000 is not good enough for you, you can dial it down so that the chances of getting spam will increase, but the false positives will decrease. And that's the lever that you have. And then you can take different actions. They're enumerated on at the bottom here. You can simply say, if this mail is spam, just delete it. Don't deliver it. Or you can say quarantine it, or add X header, or modify subject line, or simply redirect to a particular mailbox. Question?
Quarantine on EOP, or is it on junk mail?
Excellent question. So the question was, is quarantine a database in Exchange Online Protection Service, or is it junk mail in the Outlook? The answer is the quarantine is a special database in Exchange Online Protection. And by default, in fact, that's a great segue to the no, it's not a great segue. It's the following slide. Sorry. By default, the emails that are marked as spam will be delivered to your junk mail folder in Outlook, to your users. And originally, when I came to this team 2+ years ago, I thought that's what people would want. Who would want quarantine? But then we got earful feedback that no, there is still a set of customers who do want to have quarantine. And I've heard 3 different rationales there. I've heard that, well, I'm paying you to filter the service, to filter my mail. I don't want to receive junk on premise. And I don't want to waste my bandwidth. Even though, seriously, most of the spam is so small in size that one YouTube video that your single employee watches for a day, in one day, probably in more than entire span that you're going to get there. Another one was that I don't want my employees to go and waste their time because I know them, even if it's in junk mail folder, they'll be bored and they'll go and start playing with it. So that was eye-opening for me. And the third one that I've heard was, if it arrived, that I was the only one that I said, huh, that's interesting. I didn't think of it and I see value there, was if the mail arrives to my on-prem, then I have to archive it and subject to all of the compliance requirements, etc. If you guys stop it there, it's not my headache. I said, that's interesting. So, those were the three reasons that I've heard from customers at last Mac, 1.5 years ago. So, did I address your question? Yeah, all right. Now let's keep moving to learn more about the anti-spam. As I mentioned, we also enable the bulk protection. So we have the list of bulk senders, and if you tell us to treat bulk as spam, we will be treating it in exactly the same way. Today in the product, when you say that treat bulk as spam, we take the most obnoxious bulk senders and start treating them as spam. Moving forward, we are looking into providing more flexibility and more ability for you to control categories, but no timeline at this point I can share, but we're looking into that. And the last area that I want to touch on this slide is ability to block the spam based on the language of the message as well as origin of the message. So you as an administrator can say that, you know, I never do business with, pick your country of choice, where you don't expect any messages from, in that language, I shouldn't say country, but in that language. And you can say any message arriving in that language, just treat it as spam. And also you can say that any message originating from a particular region in the world, from a particular country, could be treated as spam if you don't expect to ever do business with them. And the last slide on anti-spam area, and we spent already, I think we covered most of it. It's what do you do with the mail that is identified as spam? And I already mentioned that it could come to junk mail folder, or it could be stored in the anti-spam. In anti-spam quarantine. Spam quarantine. And I mentioned that, in fact, you said that only administrators have access to it, but very soon we will enable ability of your end users to go to that portal and retrieve the messages. Today, what end users can do is you can configure email spam notification to come with a frequency between 1 day, once a day, or once every 15 days. And based on that, they will be getting the digest of, in the last day or in the last X days, depending on what you configured, we detected this many mails. And if you think that not only this many, but we also provide the subject of those mails. So the end users, your employees can select that, oh, no, this is the mail that I was waiting for. This is not a junk. And we get that signal. There was a question.
When is that going to be available?
I'm sorry?
When is it going to be available?
When is it going to be available? I hesitate to give the exact date, but I would say in the very near future. And to provide more light there, I would say that we are almost done with coding it, and it's right now in validation stages. So, and then we will catch the next train, and our trains depart literally on a weekly basis. So I would say,
I hear you prior to 2015.
oh, definitely, definitely. I can be more specific. I can say coming quarter. Yeah. So, and even there, I hope to beat your expectations, but yeah. All right. So let's move and talk about the anti-malware. Anti-malware is much more straightforward. 3 engines, as I mentioned, and all you need to do is to say block entire message or delete attachment and replace attachment with the default text notifying recipient that the attachment was removed, or you can include your own custom alert text, if you will, as part of that replacement. Yes? I'm sorry?
Can you tell me what those other 2 engines are?
No, it's our policy not to, because we reserve the rights to change them. And but I can tell you that they're very reputable in the world. So, all right. Yes?
Is there any thought about adding a similar policy for
I know that we have exchange transport policy allows you to block executables, but you want to go beyond that. You're saying that if today we have a policy that says if the attachment contains executable, block it. I see. How many people would want to have that? Ah. We have it in you. Oh, in FAPI. Okay. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. So the comment I should have repeated. The comment was that FAPI used to have ability to block the attachments with particular extension, like JPEG or. Yeah, and notify the recipient and. Yeah. So I saw plenty of hands asking for resurrection of this feature in EOP. I'll take it back to engineering team. Thank you. And you asked how can we do notifications here when the attachment is stopped or when the mail is stopped. Somebody asked about what happens when we stop the mail and don't let the mail go. So you can clarify, you can specify whether you want to notify the internal senders or whether you want to notify the external senders. As well, you have an option of saying that send me notification when some of my internal senders are sending malware. So you will be warned when somebody from your organization is sending malware, because usually it's an indication that they've been compromised. So let's spend a few minutes on managing policies. You can use the same rules as the exchange transport rules. In fact, we moved from the FAPI special rules, we migrated to in EOP to exchange transport rules. And some of the new conditions that you can configure there are sender IP matches the list of IP addresses that you have. That's one of them. You can scan the attachments. The executables in attachments is what I mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago. You can configure what sensitive information is for you, and we will stop the messages containing sensitive information. And finally, you can do it based on the size of the message or of the attachment. The sensitive information is, of course, a broad topic. Especially DLP is focusing on it, and we will apply those DLP policies as part of the filtering of your mail. In fact, I have a slide on DLP. I'll spend a couple of minutes there. Now, once on the previous slide we were talking about conditions. Once the conditions identified, then you can talk about what actions to take. And you can generate the incident report, or you can require the encryption, TLS encryption. There is different types of encryption. I'll talk on this next slide. You can put the message in quarantine, as we discussed, or you can use special outbound connector that you configure yourself for the cases when the policy hits. Now, in terms of new options, my favorite one is the test mode. It's the second bullet, but I'll be chronological here. I'll start with the first one. You can specify the time period for how long the policy should be in place. It could be related to experimentation, or it could be related to a particular tax season or something else. And then the test mode is my favorite, because before you get burned by stopping some critical mail that comes from your executive, you can put it in test mode. And that means that the policy will not stop the mail, but you will get the reports at the end of this pilot period to see who would have been impacted and what would have been the impact. So it will help you to make an educated decision and prevent painful experiences. And finally, Asaf mentioned today in keynotes that when we detect that, for example, DLP rule or any other rule that you want, that you're interested in, triggers, or some message triggers one of those rules, then you can apply action of using RMS to send the mail within your organization if you're using RMS, or in some rare cases when you use RMS with your partners, you can apply the same transport rule. Or if you're using this new feature called Office 365 message encryption, you can apply it as well as a result when the rule is triggered by email. And it was mentioned, I'll just, in the keynotes, I'll just briefly describe the fundamental differences. RMS encryption provides you this rich capability of telling what you can or cannot do with the mail, not only encrypting it, but you can say do not forward, do not print, do not whatever. But it is much more complex to deploy and use, unless you're using RMS in the cloud, than this lightweight version of Office 365 message encryption that allows you to send a mail to anybody, regardless whether you have any previous relationship with them. Like mortgage broker can send a mortgage document to a client, and client may have Gmail account or Hotmail account or Yahoo, doesn't matter. And that's the scenario that we're talking about. There was a question.
That was just a question on S-MIME and OA. Is that supposed to be available this month?
S-MIME and OA, I do not remember. I'll have to follow up with. I'm sure we have experts here on that topic. And in fact, there is an encryption session, I think. And at the end, I'll show you the list of all related sessions, but I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah. Yes?
Is that message encryption built into EOP, or is it add-on service for purchase?
Yes, please. So the question was, is OME, Office 365 message encryption, is it part of EOP licensing or it is an add-on service?
So it's part of Windows Azure Rights Management that gives you the traditional capabilities like do not forward, company confidential. So we have included that as part of Windows Azure Rights Management. So buy that SKU and you get both RMS and Office 365 message encryption.
Did it address your question?
It's included with your E3 licenses.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Windows Azure Rights Management is already part of E3. So if you are an E3 customer, you have it by default.
So E3 SKU has it. So that's the answer. I don't know if there is. And Shobit, do you know if there is, if you don't have E3, is there a way to purchase it separately? Okay, so you can purchase it separately as well. All right. One slide on data loss prevention. Effectively, it comes down to finding the right balance between protecting your data and satisfying the regulatory requirements, and at the same time, not screwing up your workforce, not significantly impacting their productivity. That's the balance that you're striving to reach. So the solution that we have here is we have the pretty rich set of pre-cooked patterns, I would say, like Social Security, credit cards, etc., that span all multiple geographies, multiple governments around the world. And then you can add on top of that. And Asaf showed today in the morning, we also support the fingerprinting of the document. So if you have a document that will be fingerprint that needs to be fingerprinted, and then you can flag similar documents as the ones that are triggering the DLP flags here. Now, have said that, you do not want to put draconian measures blocking sending any information that matches those patterns. So for example, if it is part of the business for your employees to once in a while send a single credit card number, it's okay to allow them to do it. It doesn't need to be all or nothing. You can configure the LP policy that says if an employee says one credit card number, you don't need to stop them. But if employee sends a larger amount of credit card numbers, stop them, or at least advise them that they are attempting to perform such and such action, and allow them to override the policy. Now, I'm not saying that you will always allow them to override policy, but you can specify certain scenarios where it's okay, where you rely on your users to make a decision to override the policy. And if they do override the policy, then the event is logged and audited later on. There you will have a record that they overwritten the policy. And there are other scenarios where it's not okay to override it, and you will simply put the block, and they can't do anything about it. And as Asaf was trying to show it in the morning, I'm sure he already did it in the previous session, user doesn't need to wait for the message to go through the pipeline of the EOP or Exchange Online to learn that there is a violation of the policy. But the latest Outlook, as well as now OA and MOA, provide the tips as user is typing the mail or attaching the attachment containing this sensitive information. So I want to take a few minutes to show you a couple of things. I want to show you 3 capabilities in our demo. The first I want to show you, if you're not familiar yet with our Management Console, which, as I said, is native in Office 365. I do want to show you this new capability of MTRT, message tracing, to see how you can get the data older than 7 days, as well as I want to show you the latest and greatest reports that are not available yet. So the previous two things that I'm going to show are already available to you today. The reports are going to be available when? Mitch?
Next month.
Next month. All right. So. All right. So I just logged in here as administrator of this company. I don't even remember what the company name is. But this is the dashboard. I arrive here, and it tells me on the front page right here what's the current health of the services. You can see here only 3 services right now. It's Exchange Online Protection, Identity Services, and Office 365. If you subscribe to the full suite of Office 365, you would get here Exchange and SharePoint and Link and so on. And it shows me that there are no issues. And you can take a look here and see what was the deal in the last 7 days. And so far, it was good. By the way, this demo is running against the real life production environment. So this is not some fake environment I'm using. And then you can take a look here at Message Center, where you get latest oops, what just happened? You get the latest notifications about the upcoming changes to the service. In this particular case, it tells me that the Windows XP support is coming to an end. It also has here a brief summary of the new capabilities that were shipped in February. And I'm sure as we go into April, it will give the brief list of what was added in March, so that you can stay up to date in one single place on what the new capabilities that are being made available in the service. Then another thing to emphasize here, you can go to users and groups and manage them here. You can go to the list of domains and manage them here. Where I'm going with this is this is a single place where you configure your users, groups, domains that are common across entire O365. So if you are on-premise customer and you start in configuration of Exchange Online Protection while your mailboxes are still on-premise, you're investing into the future as well. Because when you do this configuration, you will take advantage of it when you migrate your mailboxes. When you add SharePoint there, you will not need to repeat this process over and over. The way how I describe it to my team, it's like you're getting married into a family of Office 365. And by doing this investment one time, you establish the foundation to expand for other services as well. Let's go to the administrative center of the Exchange Online Protection here. And I'll quickly go to protection section just for a second, just show you. You can configure your malware filters here, connection filter right here, content filter, outbound spam, quarantine, those things that we discussed. This is the single place where you're going to go and configure all of them. But I do want to spend a few minutes here at Mailflow, and I want to go to message trace. So imagine that one of your employees, let's say Mitch, is contacting you and says that I sent the mail or I was supposed to receive the mail and it never got to me. So you would come here, you would specify the time period, and by default you can choose here past 24 hours, past 48 hours, past 7 days, let's say 7 days. Or you can do the custom boundary as well if needed. And then you would come here to recipient, and you will choose, I'll choose Mitch, I'll add him here. And I'll say search. And this view gives me the view of all of the mails that were supposed to come to Mitch. And if I see that one of them failed here. So if I open this mail, hopefully it will tell me what happened there. And it does tell me that the transport rule stopped this message. So there was a transport rule that said that a message meeting such and such characteristics should be stopped, and that's why it was stopped. And that's why the message was not delivered. And you can see the information here on when it happened, as well as you can see the details of who sent it, etc. And what was the transport policy as well. In this case, it was called vendor info. I don't know what it means, but yeah. Now, yes?
Can that list be exported, downloaded
Yes, yeah, yeah. And moreover, I'll show you what happens today. In the past, you were able, and probably through January, you were able to use only to query data only for the last 7 days. As I mentioned, we expanded that period, and you can now query the data for the last up to 90 days. So let's say you want to see what was the information or all the messages sent from a vendor called Contoso.com. And you would come here to custom range, and you would say, for entire month of March, I want to see all the messages that came here from. Notice that I use the star there, so I don't need to specify a particular sender. Contoso.com. And I want to, oops. Oh, at, yes. Oh, at least the error checking works. Yeah. So I want to see all the mails that are coming from Contoso.com. And notice that the range is longer than 7 days. So what's going to happen is I'm going to click here on search, and it tells me your message trace has been submitted. An email message will be sent to you when it's available. And you can also check under the pending and completed traces to see the progress of the trace. So effectively, it says we started the job. Once it is done, you'll get notification. But if you don't want to wait for notification, what happened? Yes, I didn't, because I'm not expecting this email to come during this presentation. So I'm just going to skip to, but thanks for pointing. You're absolutely right. Yes. So if you go to the pending or completed ones, so the one that I just started, it hasn't started yet, but I can go to one of the previous ones. So for example, here. And I'll go down to the completed reports, and I'll ask to download this report here. And so this way I can, so this is the answer effectively. This spreadsheet was downloaded upon completion. So I submitted this query earlier today, and it completed. And now I can see the results of the message trace details in this view. And as I said, you can go back to up to 90 days to do that. So let me move on, and I'll go back to the console here. And let's take a look at some of the reports that you can get in the product. So as I said, this is a brand new feature that is available only, we call it through flighting. That means only to a certain segment of users or customers. I'm a customer right now. It's not available to all customers. When we land a new feature, we often use this capability of allowing only a small number of people to access the service while we're baking it. And those small number of people, usually ourselves, our testers, etc. So if I come here to send and received mail, I will get the trends here in terms of how many mails were sent and received. I can change the time frame here. Instead of 7 days, I want to take a look at 30 days. I can slice and dice as I want. I can remove, let's say, transport rules, and the scale will adjust itself. So it allows me to play with this data as I will. Let me go to a different view. You can do the same with malware detection, and you can get the list of the malware that was sent to me. Similarly, you can take a look at the spam and get the trends on spam messages being sent. And if I come here, for example, and I'm interested on what happened on 3/26, I click on this data point, and I get the view of the messages that were sent here. And I can see who is the recipient that is being targeted by this spam. So you can, I don't know whether it provides enough insights or not for you, but you can figure out if somebody is under attack of spam, if there is a direct attack against a particular employee. And the last report that I do want to show here is rule matches for mail. So similarly as before, you can go and take a look at the longer time range here. And I can see that there was a spike here on March 16th in terms of the triggering of the policy. So notice one nuance on this view. The data to the, or the part of the graph to the right from this line is white. And that means that this data is available real time. This is within 7 days. Data to the left from this line is gray. That means that you will need to submit a request, similar to how I just did for message tracing. So if I click here, I will get notification that says, older data takes a little longer to access, but give us some time and we can get it for you. Just click the link below, this one, and let us know what to title your report and where to send an email notification. And similar to the previous scenario, you will specify the email, as you pointed out, and you will receive notification when the report is ready. And you can go and see which reports have been created already here. And I remember that I created here a report. I looked at this data last Friday before leaving office. And where was it? No, it wasn't this one. Oh, this one, investigation of rule match spike. So this report is complete, obviously, by now. It was complete on that day. And similarly to previous scenario, I can download this Excel spreadsheet. And I will see there the details of who was the recipient that was receiving these mails that violated my policy, as well as who was the sender, what was the policy, etc. And all the details are in this diagram. Another scenario that I don't have cooked with me right now, but is interesting, is DLP-related reports. When people are sending the mails that are triggering DLP protection, you can see who is continuously attempting to violate your reports. Or maybe they have the right business justification, or maybe they don't. So that could be an interesting insight that you would get from this report. So that concludes my demo, and I'll go back to the deck. So we looked at the admin demo. We looked at the granular reporting options. And so this is the slide where I do want to pause and say that the investments that we're making in the Exchange Online protection right now is higher than ever before, literally, in terms of humans working on the service. And it is reflected in the number of features that we're shipping. I took a look before coming here on the features that we shipped since the beginning of this year. And the extended message trace and reporting that you saw, and going from 7 days to 90 days, is one good example. Another feature that we just shipped is directory-based edge blocking. I know it was available in 14, but we just added it in 15. Those of you who don't know what it means, if you want to stop mail from being sent to your on-premise Exchange server, if the intended user does not exist, we will stop it. So you'll just upload your directory through DirSync, for example, to the Office 365, and we will stop the mail that is sent to fictitious users. Another feature that we're adding is, or we already added, match subdomains, we call it. So if you configure your company with a list of allowed domains, and one of them, let's say, cantoso.com, you don't need to manually go and configure a.cantoso.com, b.cantoso.com, and so on. There is a number of customers who have hundreds of domains underneath that umbrella domain. So you don't need to do it on an individual basis. You can do it just on the umbrella domain. Finally, we did add the remote PowerShell for customers without hosted mailboxes. In the past, it was available with Exchange Online for the customers who have mailboxes in the cloud. We added it also for Exchange Online protection standalone without any hosted mailboxes. The features that are coming pretty soon, the first one, you asked already about it, end user ability to access quarantine. It will come very soon. Another one is DKIM for inbound emails. Those of you who know DKIM would appreciate it. Those of you who don't can learn about it at the upcoming session where Ori and Tamara are going to talk about it. Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow. And we did claim in the past the support for IPv6. We support it today. But in order to use IPv6 senders, you need to pre-configure who your senders are going to be. With this investment, we are allowing to receive emails from anonymous senders, same as with IPv4. We are planning to make this feature available gradually, meaning we're not planning to make it available to the entire world at once. And we are looking right now for interested parties. Those of you who are interested in leveraging IPv6, come and talk to us. We want to have this early adopter program for IPv6, and right now there is one governmental agency that is eager to start using it. We would like to get more of interested parties. I did talk about this at the beginning. I do want to emphasize this in the era where everybody is concerned about where our data is or where it flows. We do want to emphasize that we're very, very serious about it. We build sufficient capacity in North America. We're building capacity, expanding our capacity in Europe. We are building capacity in Asia Pacific. And the previous two regions, we guarantee geo-affinity, that your data will be, your mails will be serviced only within your own region. That statement is true for North America. That statement is true for EMEA today. That statement is true for People's Republic of China. And also it is true for special governmental community cloud that is hosted in US, where certain governmental agencies are hosted. APAC, Asia Pacific, will be available in the next few months, within the next 2 quarters or so, I would say. Yeah, I think third quarter of this year when we will make it broadly available, but we can start testing these grounds next quarter with some customers. So, question?
Can users configure their own safe list and block list?
Yes. Yeah. So the question was, can users configure their own safe list and block list? The answer is yes. We will respect those. Okay. Yes? Question? Uh-huh.
And I noticed when you requested a report,
Yes.
A, there was no ability to schedule it, B, when it came through, it was just the raw data, it didn't have the pretty colors.
Okay. So the question was that when I configured the report to be generated, there was no ability to schedule that report to be sent on a regular basis. Neither it was in pretty colors. It was black and white and just boring numbers. That is true today. How many people feel that scheduled reports is critical for them? All right. Thank you. And pretty colors? Can you use pivot point or do something? Yeah. So I get it. It's pretty colors to please management. That's the scenario. I understood. Yeah. All right. Thank you. The only question I would be very interested to discuss over beer at party is what do we do with different preferences of different management? But it's conversation to have offline. Oh, make it color. Oh, so suggestion was to just allow fine-tuning the colors. So it's, yeah, all right. Provisioning or onboarding to the service is pretty straightforward and easy. You just need to verify the domain, configure the MX record, fine-tune your anti-malware, and even more important, anti-spam configuration. I don't want to downplay this. It is important to configure properly your anti-spam settings. Create the rules, your ETR rules, exchange transport rules, and run the hybrid wizards to configure your connectors. That's pretty much it. But again, I do want to emphasize the importance of anti-spam settings configuration. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So are we talking about the scenario? Let me understand the scenario, and then I'll repeat the question. You're referring to the case when the mail is bounded to you, to your own premise? So coming in from EOP to your own premise. And you're saying that the connectors, you had the ability of having different weights, if you will. And there would be preferred sites to go to, but if it becomes unresponsive, then you would fail over to another one. Yeah, I see. So you know that it's not there in EOP. I see. Okay. And how critical is that scenario?
What happens now? Now that it's changed, is it like order of IPs or what?
So it effectively becomes round robin or randomly selection?
Well, that's what I asked the engineers, and they said that it was just root preference, whatever's in there first.
I see.
The thing is, if you put a different IP address in, if it's the first on the list, you may not want that one to be the first on the list.
I see. You know, I wouldn't claim the expertise in specific configuration of connectors. We have a special session on connectors. Maybe Carolyn, our program manager who's responsible for connectors, will be there. Maybe that's the best forum to ask. Anybody in the room from connectors team? No, I don't see so. Yeah. But I can follow up. I can put you in touch with her to gain more insights there. Yeah. All right. And this is the summary slide, emphasizing that the focus of our service is to protect against the malware and spam, provide the data protection capabilities in form of encryption and data loss prevention. You've seen the administrative console and the rich reporting, and my favorite, the integration with Office 365, because I look at it as investment into the future. And the geo affinity, as well as with constant support. And when you see now 24/7/365 Microsoft support, it's not only referring to the people who are answering the calls and helping you on call, but it's also referring to hundreds of people who are getting those alerts and notifications and prevent the problems before they hit you. So that's a very important takeaway from here. We have few questions, few minutes, 2 minutes for the questions. And I'll leave you with this slide. These are the I'll take questions, but I want to bring this to your attention. These are the related sessions to the EOP topic. If you're interested, please prioritize attending. Yes, question? You want to use the mic or no? Okay.
So you're saying you're going to queue the messages so there's no data loss.
We would,
And when you have the ability for the end user to go at that queue if they want to.
Oh, so let me clarify the question. Are you talking about the scenario where recipient cannot receive mail and we're queuing it? Yes. So the question was that you guys are saying that you're queuing the messages when the recipient server is down or unavailable. Do you have, so that you guarantee that the mail will not be lost? Do you give ability to users to go and look up which mails are in that queue? First of all, the answer is no. Second of all, we never guarantee that that mail will not be lost, because after a certain period of time, we will stop queuing it. We can't queue it for infinite period of time. I think today we queue it for 2 days, 48 hours. So.
I just wanted to answer one of the questions that came up earlier. That was around SMIME in OA. So the answer to that is it's already part of the Exchange SP1 release, and it's already been rolled out for the service as well. So I think we are about 90 to 95% complete. So more or less, you probably should be seeing it in your tenants.
So do you need worldwide deployment before it's available?
Yes.
Oh, then
It's available. It's available in those tenants. Already in few tenants, it's not available. So
I see. Okay. So it's being rolled out right now. The answer is that SMIME and OA is being rolled out right now. Yes. Question?
Does EOP use any of the exchange transport rules right? Edge transport rules right now? I mean, accessible via PowerShell. Is that something in the works? Do you recommend still using exchange edge servers in your environment to communicate between exchange and EOP?
I'm thinking right now. So the question. Oh, you use the mic. So the scenario is that you have Edge on-premise. Is that right? Or
we don't have Edge on-premise.
Okay.
We're getting rid of our existing AV solution and going to EOP.
Great.
So there's a few things that EOP doesn't do for me right now that I believe the Edge does. So I have to decide whether or not to bring up Edge servers or decide if EOP can handle those needs.
I never heard of Edge rules being used in EOP. We're referring to them as, are they different than exchange transport rules?
They're not hub
They-
transport rules.
I
They're
see.
like address rewrites that we do.
I see.
And maybe there's a different way. And maybe
Maybe there is a different
maybe
way.
I'll
Let's
circle around
brainstorm.
somebody
Yes,
else
yes,
on
yeah,
here,
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
comment to the attachment control.
Uh-huh.
Because I contacted Premier Support a while back because I've been playing around with EOP.
Yes.
In transport rules, there's a way to block by attachment file type
In EOP?
in the transport rules.
Oh, okay, yes.
So just to answer to that.
Oh,
one
great.
question
So
from
you're saying
earlier,
that we already support that capability?
it's already there. They
Okay.
had to point me to find out where to do it.
Okay,
But I was
great.
able to.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. Yes. There was a question. Well, she doesn't listen. She doesn't hear me. All right, I'll follow up offline. So, but the clarification was good. So the clarification from gentleman, what's your name? Clarification from Brent was that there is a way today in ETR, in Exchange Transport Rules, to configure blocking attachments with particular extensions. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
So mine's along this.
Ah, I see. Okay. All right.
So mine's actually along the same lines. We had, well, the company I am in, they had a problem not too terribly long ago where they were getting zip files sent to them with the password in the zip file, so it was encrypted.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, they were using the Google
Postini?
Yeah, Postini at that time. And so people were opening it because Google couldn't scan the message, and we were getting a bunch of viruses through. Since then, we've been quarantining the zip files, and we send the user a notification saying, you know, you've gotten a zip file, but make sure this is something you really want to get.
Okay.
From what I understand, I'm not going to be able to do that once we transition from FOPI to EOP, and I'm wanting to make sure that
Are you able to do it in FOPI?
we're able to do it in FOPI. And so the user's able to go out to their quarantine, they can look in their policy folder,
Okay.
and then inside of their policy folder, they can look at it and release it or not, but
I
it's
see.
an added step to make them
John,
check on it.
when we do we send any notification to users when quarantine contains transport rule cut messages? I'll close it.
We have to close them and lock them as well.
Okay, all right, you do it then.
But if you want them up,
I wanted them up for a few more minutes because people know.
the other rooms, I'll come make it.
Thank you, I appreciate it.